All my efforts, Mrs. Eddy told a news reporter, all my efforts, all my prayers and tears are for humanity and for the spread of peace and love among mankind.
Not long after being established in her new home, a slip of paper appeared on Mrs. Eddy's desk. On it, she had written 4 words: The Christian Science Monitor.
Early in the summer, she began thinking and praying about a daily paper, although for a time she said nothing about it. Adelaide still.
Actually, she had been thinking and praying about a daily newspaper for a much longer time.
30 years earlier, in the second edition of Science and Health, she had voiced the need for a newspaper at our command, through which to right the wrongs and answer the untruths.
In the first issue of the Journal of Christian Science, she again brought up this need.
She wrote, "An organ from the Christian Scientists has become a necessity."
In 1896, in her miscellaneous writings, she revised the word organ in that statement to read newspaper, but her definition of its purpose was unchanged.
"If we can aid in abating suffering and diminishing sin," she wrote, "we shall have accomplished much."
Mankind's need, she saw, was not merely to be informed, but to be elevated, purified, saved. In 1898, she returned to the subject in a letter to one of the trustees of the Publishing Society.
"The dignity of our cause and the good of the students," she wrote, "demand of us to publish a weekly newspaper."
Despite resistance within her church, the idea went forward. But although the Christian Science Weekly included news columns, it was not truly a newspaper. It was a magazine directed at members of her church as well as the general public. The next year, she renamed it Christian Science Sentinel.
In 1902, she was still having thoughts about starting a widespread press, as she put it in a letter, but the time was not yet.
In March 1908, she received a letter from a Christian scientist working on Boston's Newspaper Row. The young newspaperman, John L. Wright, proposed that a daily newspaper with high journalistic standards, published by Christian scientists, would be welcomed by the public. His letter struck a chord with her, except for one particular concept.
I am not thinking of a daily official Christian Science paper or one containing in its title the words Christian Science. John L. Wright.
She quickly drafted a response correcting this misconception.
"Beloved students," she wrote, "I have had this newspaper scheme in my thought for quite a while, and herein send my name for our daily newspaper, the Christian Science Monitor."
Wright's letter had caught her in the midst of moving from the 3rd floor back downstairs to her own rebuilt quarters. That reply to him was never sent. For now, she sheltered the idea, still waiting for its right time. Two months later, in May, she felt a divine impulsion to bring forth a newspaper to bless a burdened world by spreading the message of Christian Science. She drafted a letter to the Christian Science Board of Directors.
The draft read, "The time has come when we must have a daily paper entitled Christian Science Monitor. When I proposed having the Weekly Sentinel, students held back at first. They may hold back this time. But I, in the name of God, direct you to do this."
That message, too, was not sent. She continued to bide her time. Then, in July, she experienced a series of severe physical attacks. Once again, she was confronting those pangs of leadership, and again, the forward step was marked by a healing. Calvin Fry noted in his diary,
"She had been having a series of attacks for over a week, which kept her in bed and on the lounge almost the entire time.
The crisis occurred the night of July 27th.
At about 12 o'clock, an editor of the Boston Herald called and asked at what hour Mrs. Eddy died. He said the rumor on the street is that she is dead. Calvin Fry.
For her metaphysical workers, this exposed the root of the trouble, the desire of all that hated Christian Science to see its leader dead and buried, concentrated, as so often before, in a sensationalized press. Alerted to the nature of the attack, her staff refocused their healing work and prevailed.
When this telephone call was received, it revealed the cause of the attack, and she gained much relief. Calvin Fry.
Next morning, Mrs. Eddy was back at her desk, pencil in hand. In bold strokes, she wrote a commanding note to the board of directors.
Notice, she wrote, so soon as the publishing house debt is paid, I request the Christian Science Board of Directors to start a daily newspaper called Christian Science Monitor. This must be done without fail.
The idea's time had come. This message was sent. The church's 5 directors had been chosen over the years by Mrs. Eddy. The former school superintendent from New Hampshire, Ira Knapp, had been on the board since his earliest days, as had Civil War veteran William B. Johnson and former businessman Stephen Chase. Canadian-born Archibald McClellan had been appointed in 1903. Mrs. Eddy considered him, in her words, a born editor, and assigned him to edit the periodicals of the Christian Science Publishing Society. Allison Stewart of Chicago had just joined the board in January. None of them had any experience with newspaper publishing. With their leader's direction, the board of directors had overseen the establishment and rapid growth of their church, built the mother church edifice and its domed extension, and had just constructed a headquarters for the Christian Science Publishing Society. They wouldn't be blamed for feeling they and the movement could rest for a while. Any such rest was shattered by Mrs. Eddy's brief message, which came just as she had written it, in pencil. As she had foreseen, the first reaction was resistance. Her secretary recalls,
"There was quite a little hesitancy on the part of the directors to start this newspaper. They referred it back to me with a request to say to Mrs. Eddy that this should go to the trustees of the Publishing Society. They were really sparring for wind, so to speak. Adam Dickey."
Their leader was not one to spar for wind. She immediately started sending instructions to McClellan as editor-in-chief.
One of them was to prepare a pretty design for the motto she had given the paper. First the blade, then the ear. After that, the full corn in the ear.
But as days passed, it appeared nothing was happening. On Saturday the following week, she rang for her secretary.
"Mr. Dickey," she said, "take your pencil." And she dictated a letter addressed to the trustees of the Publishing Society.
That same day, Saturday, the note was sent to the church board for them to transmit to the trustees. The trustees of the Publishing Society had no idea what was coming when they were summoned to an urgent meeting Monday morning. One of them, the gentle, poetic William Mackenzie, with his wife Daisette, was on vacation at a farm in New Hampshire when the telegram came on Sunday. At dawn Monday, he hiked 3 miles to a rail platform and flagged down the early train to Boston. In the Publishing Society boardroom, Mackenzie joined the other 2 trustees, former Judge Clifford Smith and the energetic Midwesterner Thomas Hatton. Director Archibald McClellan presented them with the astonishing letter from their leader.
"It is my request," she wrote the trustees, "that you start a daily newspaper at once and call it the Christian Science Monitor. Let there be no delay. The cause demands that it be issued now."
The very next day, after meeting with the directors, the trustees responded. "Beloved leader, the announcement contained in your letter is good news. We rejoice to have this additional opportunity of assisting you in your plans for the welfare of humanity. With that, they all went to work, quietly. The entire enterprise was to be kept strictly confidential.
Mrs. Eddy instructed her workers that a needful work should be established, if not completed, before there was talking about it. William Mackenzie.
Let there be no delay, Mrs. Eddy had said. There wasn't. But the date agreed on for the first issue was November 25th, barely 3 months away, and they were starting from scratch.
At the beginning of this period, the only substantial thing existing was the thought of such an enterprise, as expressed by Mary Baker Eddy. This thought alone was the foundation upon which the trustees and their assistants must build. John J. Flynn, Chief, editorial page.
Within days, working in secrecy, McClellan brought together a small staff led by Alexander Dodds, who came from the Pittsburgh Post and Sun, and John J. Flynn from the Chicago Inter-Ocean. And there were a handful of others. These few promptly produced an 8-page prototype of the paper to be reviewed by Mrs. Eddy. She took an active role, appointed key personnel, examined paper samples, selected type fonts, directed how the newspaper's name should be displayed, and reworded the motto. All the while, she pressed toward the November 25th date. Could all the impediments to that deadline be overcome in time? The newspaper would need equipment for a stereotyping foundry, mailing department, accounting department, advertising department, and newsroom, all in working order for the first edition. To house all this, a new wing must be added to the just completed publishing building. A row of apartment houses stood in the way. In a short time, the block was cleared, foundations and floors were laid, the new presses were bolted into place, while stone masons raised the walls around them. With no telegraph wire in that part of Boston, the paper would have no access to stock ticker reports and business news. Christian Science had recently attracted the interest of the one man who could help, the president of Western Union. He stepped in to order temporary lines strung across several city blocks to the Monitor newsroom. Composing room equipment and type fonts from a New Jersey manufacturer were aboard a freighter that collided with another vessel in Long Island Sound. The entire shipment went to the bottom.
The company was very alert, and in an incredibly short time had a duplicate order on the way to Boston. With some lively activity on our part, we soon made up for lost time. Amos Weston, foreman, composing room.
The paper would need a full crew of reporters, editors, national and international correspondents, typographers, and pressmen who were both experienced professionals and faithful Christian Scientists. Could enough such people be found? In mid-October, the veil of secrecy was lifted. An announcement in the Sentinel requested Christian Scientists in the news field to send their names to Boston. Over the coming days, 1,000 responses flooded the mailroom and filled every position. John Wright, the young Boston newspaper man who had written Mrs. Eddy in March, became city editor. One by one, impediments to publication were cleared away. Now that word was out, a different kind of impediment appeared to block the vision of a Christian Scientist's newspaper: opposition to the name Mrs. Eddy had given it.
Many arguments had been advanced, all of them well-meant, some of them extremely plausible from a material point of view, that the term Christian Science should not appear in the title. John J. Flynn.
Newspapermen predicted that those 2 words on its masthead would sink the paper as soon as it launched. Even in her own church and household, some were doubting her title for the Monitor.
I was in the room one day when Mr. Dickey talked with her about it. This may have been at Mr. McClellan's suggestion. He told her that the paper would not be allowed in any public places, such as barbershops, etc., because of antagonism to the name Christian Science. Adelaide Still.
She reportedly replied to one such suggestion, "Well, if antagonism is to be aroused for this reason, let it come and be disposed of now. Then we shall not have to meet it hereafter."
Finally, McClellan himself came for a private meeting in her study to urge one last time removing Christian Science from the masthead.
The members of the House were on tiptoes, waiting outside the door of Mrs. Eddy's room. The conference was brief. A moment or so and the editor emerged. Said he, "Mrs. Eddy is firm, and her answer is, 'God gave me this name, and it remains.'" Irving Tomlinson.
Mrs. Eddy had stood out for a title which would leave no doubt regarding the exact identity of the newspaper. She was understood to be immovable in the position that here, as at all times, the truth must be expressed and adhered to. John J. Flynn.
With that established, the staff came together. Typewriters and linotypes clacked. Trial runs began. The start date drew near. November 25, the day before Thanksgiving, dawned murky. In Boston Harbor, fog thick as pea soup held ships offshore unable to dock. At 9 o'clock, Mrs. Eddy called all the workers to her study. She asked if it was a dark morning. Yes, was the reply. A heavy fog makes it darker than usual.
To which she responded, "This, in truth, is the lightest day of all days. This is the day when our daily paper goes forth to lighten mankind."
In their brand new building, Monitor pressmen set up to run the first edition. By afternoon, the pressman pulled the first clean copy to be delivered to Chestnut Hill by maintenance man Walter Watson.
It was all securely wrapped and tied with pink ribbon, and I carried it as carefully as if I had been transporting the crown jewels. Walter W. Watson.
It was late in the day, and the lights were on, when our leader was told it was ready for her approval. I remember well how carefully, almost reverently, they handled it. William Rathbun.
She came forward with both hands extended and received the paper and clasped it to her heart. Her great hope, which she had cherished so long, had at last found expression. Daisette Mackenzie.
The newspaper Mary Baker Eddy founded, and which she read every day, was not a mere postscript to her life's work.
She told members of her household, "When I established the Christian Science Monitor, I took the greatest forward step that I had taken since I gave science and health to the world."
Strong words, especially for those who still wondered. For what purpose was a church publishing a general daily newspaper? In its first edition, Mrs. Eddy defined that high purpose, signaled by the paper's very name for which she had fought. In its lead editorial, she reviewed the purpose behind each of the names she had given her first three publications: the Christian Science Journal, Sentinel, and Herald.
She concluded, "The next I named Monitor, to spread undivided the science that operates unspent. The object of the Monitor is to injure no man, but to bless all mankind."
In the words of its later editor, Irwin Canham, and so Mrs. Eddy wrote the most important and definitive editorial the Christian Science Monitor has ever published. Here are the words of which the Christian Science Monitor has sought ever since to be worthy.